in that order by Delegate Stewart, House Bill 102 by Delegate Stein, and then 3 bills from the Real Property Man Cave of Delegate Marvin Holmes, 92, 93, and 118. And with that, Delegate Vaughn Stewart. I'm going to recognize. What order should I take his state senator first? Okay, so you're going to go first 4 minutes, and then I'm going to go to your. You have a state senator who is going to have 2 minutes, and he's virtual. So go ahead, delegate.
Situation where I should press the button. No, okay, I'm not. Okay, thank you very much. And by the way, it's a Pennsylvania state senator. I didn't just bring someone from across the street, just for clarification. So for the record, I'm Delegate Vaughn Stewart. This is House Bill 79, the Whole Homes Repair Act. So every Marylander deserves safe, warm, and dry housing, but for too many in our state, the place they call home is unsafe. From leaky roofs, from collapsing roofs to mold problems. Too many across the state have unhealthy, unsanitary conditions that they're trudging along with day in and day out. This bill is pretty simple. It creates a fund at the state level for whole home repairs. How this would work is essentially the money would go to administrating agencies, which would be nonprofits or counties, and those administrating agencies would get the money to the homeowners who need it. We're really eyeing 3 different types of repairs. We're thinking about habitability, health and safety repairs. We're thinking about aging in place repairs for seniors who want to make accessibility upgrades to their home. And we're also thinking about energy efficiency, folks who want to upgrade their water and energy systems in their home to lower their utility bills. The other aspect of the bill, or the 2 other aspects of the bill, one is a coordination component. We want this fund ultimately, and it's only a pilot program for now, but we want it to eventually serve as a bit of a one-stop shop. As you'll see in the bill in the fiscal note, there are a number of different programs on the state, local, and federal level that touch upon this issue. We really want to try to begin to coordinate these together so that homeowners have a simple and reliable vehicle that they can use to go online and get the funds they need to make repairs for their home. So there is a technical assistance aspect. There's sort of a government coordination aspect of this bill. And then the final aspect is really a workforce development piece. The bill provides and thinks about funding to administer a workforce development and an apprenticeship program, because we view this not only as a bill about blight, not only a bill about health, not only a bill about the environment, but it's also a bill about workers, and it's about creating some good paying jobs in this industry. So we were influenced by a similar bill in Pennsylvania that passed last year and became law in a bipartisan, overwhelmingly supportive fashion. You're going to hear in a minute from State Senator Nikhil Saval, who was the chief sponsor of that in the state Senate in Pennsylvania, about how their process works. We, of course, in good legislative fashion, have essentially just plagiarized what they've done and have introduced some amendments alongside Ruth Ann Norton and a few other folks that are helping us kind of like.
It is the highest form of flattery.
No, it is. We're trying to translate it from Pennsylvania to Maryland, provide a bit of a translation to make sure it is applicable. It's fair, applicable to how it works here. But we think this can be a really powerful model going forward to keep people in their homes, make accessibility upgrades, make sure that they can remain healthy, make sure that things can remain affordable. And the last piece of this is we do have a grant program in there for landlords. So for small landlords who want to participate in the program, as long as they make certain concessions in terms of affordability, they would be allowed to get forgivable loans to make habitability improvements. We hear a lot here in the committee about habitability problems in rental apartment buildings in the state. This would be a way for money to flow directly to landlords to make those upgrades and to keep their renters safe and living in those units possibly without a rent increase. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I urge a favorable report and look forward to hearing from the state senator.
Okay, well, ordinarily we go to the in-person witnesses first and then to virtual, but I'm going to reverse the order. In this instance, we're going to go to Pennsylvania State Senator Nikhil Saval because I understand he's got some legislative stuff he has to do, and so we're going to be understanding of that. Senator Saval, welcome to the Maryland House of Delegates. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to Delegate Stewart. Just a real honor to be addressing colleagues from the great state of Maryland. So I'm Nikhil Saval. I represent the people, communities, businesses, and lands of Pennsylvania's 1st Senatorial District. In July 2022, the Pennsylvania General Assembly passed the Whole Home Repairs Program into law, establishing a one-stop shop for home repairs, weatherization, and adaptation to keep Pennsylvania residents warm, safe, and dry in their homes and communities. I could not be more excited to provide supportive testimony for Maryland's potential adoption and adaptation of this program. My office designed the Whole Home Repairs Program with the understanding that Pennsylvania is not alone in its need to reckon with its aging housing stock, and it has always been our hope that this policy would be replicable in other states for use in their fight against the affordable housing crisis. The Whole Home Repairs Program builds on existing federal, state, and local home repair and weatherization programs to fill 3 main gaps identified by housing and energy practitioners. 1, lack of funding for home repairs. 2, difficulties in program coordination and technical assistance. 3, a shortage of skilled workers able to make repairs and upgrades. To combat the lack of funding, the Whole Home Repairs Program provides up to $50,000 in grants for homeowners and forgivable loans to small landlords with affordability restrictions for repairs and energy efficiency and accessibility upgrades. To ameliorate difficulties in coordination and technical assistance, the Whole Home Repairs Program allocates resources for support staff to ensure eligible applicants are accessing the right programs in the right order to meet their needs and maximize their access to holistic repairs. To alleviate the shortage of skilled workers, the Whole Home Repairs Program provides resources to increase retention in home repair and weatherization training and free apprenticeship programs.
Go ahead and complete what you were saying.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Including the provision of cash stipends to trainees so that our state can build up the local workforce needed to meet the demand and keep our skilled workers and the jobs they do local. So thank you so much for the opportunity to testify in support of Maryland's adoption of this program. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
How long are you going to be able to stay with us? What's your schedule like?
I can stay for a little bit. I have a 4 o'clock.
Okay, well, let me see if there are any members of my committee who have a question specifically for you. I actually have a question.
Sure.
Okay, Regina, you don't? Oh, okay. All right. What about you, Ann? Okay, go ahead, Ann.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Senator, for being here with us with this, and Delegate Vaughn, thank you for bringing this to us. I think this is very interesting. I wanted to ask about a lot of the people in our communities who do this kind of work. I live in a community that's, over the 40-plus years we've lived there, we've developed a whole list of local people who do everything, whether it's putting a roof on, or plumbing, or electricity, all those things. Would all those local, small, maybe sometimes independent, 1 or 2 person businesses be eligible to use this money as well?
So I can speak to the Pennsylvania context. I mean, which is the way the program is designed to function is these in Pennsylvania, as the state appropriates money through our Community and Economic Development Agency, flows to county governments, and then those county governments, they have a single entity that is the lead applicant, but they can subcontract it in our model or sub-grant, I should say, to entities that do, that already do, precisely the kinds of work that you're talking about. So provided that they meet all the other requirements that they, of course, certain thresholds may trigger prevailing wage rates or what have you. I know I can't speak to the Maryland context, but there's nothing that forbids contractors that do this work, from participating in the program otherwise. And we expect that in counties that adopt the program in Pennsylvania, that there will be, a considerable amount of work for people that already do the program, that this should allow them to scale up. Furthermore, there is a requirement in the Pennsylvania version of this bill to provide cash stipends for trainees to increase capacity in all these programs. As we know, that's a longstanding issue with the ability of these programs to function as such. So at least in theory, there should be a considerable amount of work for home repair programs. Again, there may be constraints around if they reach a certain threshold of repairs, that may trigger prevailing wage rate. That may also, people who have to do that kind of work. I just want to be clear about that.
Okay, thank you very much.
I've got one question, Senator. How much money did you allocate in your state budget to fund this mandate or this law?
So this was passed with $125 million in American Rescue Plan funds. That's the original source. So that's, as we know, those are one-time dollars. So we are currently seeking to fund the program on a more sustainable basis with the upcoming budget and with the incoming administration.
Okay.
Here in Pennsylvania.
Okay, very well. Well, I'm going to let you be on your way, and then we're going to go delegate to your in-person witnesses. Thank you very much, Senator. We'll look forward to seeing you in the future, perhaps. And you should always consider coming to the most beautiful state capital in America, Annapolis.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, delegates.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me, because Ruth Ann is up there, who would you like to have go? Ruth Ann? Okay, let me recognize a friend of the committee, Ruth Ann Norton. Welcome back, Ruth.
Welcome back for sure, and thank you, Chairman, for having me, and it's good to see all the members and friends of this committee. I'm Ruth Ann Norton. I'm the president and CEO of the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. I am a member of the EPA's Children's Health Protection Advisory Council, the chair of the Maryland Lead Commission, and currently serving as the housing co-chair for the incoming governor's Housing Policy Committee. I'm here, in fact, because the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative model that was lifted up with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the CDC, and other partners, which grew out of the Coalition on Childhood Lead Poisoning, is in fact the baseline on which the Pennsylvania law was modeled, is the how the Detroit Healthy Homes Repair Model was created, as well as the state of New Jersey, who is now using a whole house approach. And what I want to say here is this is drawn out of common sense. And here's the common sense. 52 to 62% of the time when we try to do energy efficiency and weatherization in our lowest income homes across the state of Maryland, we run into deferrals and declinations of those applications for our older adults to keep them out of extreme heat and extreme cold, and our vulnerable children because of the underlying health and safety issues. We also know that we can invest a lot of money in healthy housing and lead hazard control and asthma reduction and trip and fall prevention, but families will move if we don't address energy efficiency. So here's the data I want to tell you that has come out of the programs that we know from studies we've done in Baltimore and across the nation. We have a 66% reduction in hospitalizations, a 62% increase in school attendance, a 32% per patient per month savings for healthcare when we do this work. On average, local communities and the state government will save 20 to 25% per home repair if it's done on a line braided basis. And on the jobs front, the national study done on our work for the CEO, the Center for Employment Opportunities, showed that workers who work in a whole house approach will make on average $4,000 to $8,000 more than their peers, while we will have a reduction in cost by about 20%. I'm here to talk about how we can fund this over time if you have questions.
Okay, thank you very much. And who is the lovely person to your
Hi,
left who you would
my
like-
name is Claudia Wilson Randall. I'm the
Okay.
Executive Director of the Community Development Network of Maryland. I'm happy to be here, Chairman Barve and members of the House Environment and Transportation Committee, in support of House Bill 79. I just want to echo what has been said about this approach to housing. As you folks know, the Maryland Housing Needs Assessment that was done in 2021 by the National Center for Smart Growth and the Enterprise Community Partners, Maryland is 85,000 rental units short in affordable housing. And it's probably gone higher in the last 2 years during the pandemic as the housing market has tightened. So it is critical that not only that we produce more units, but that we also figure out how to preserve the units that we have. That is just going to be critical for Maryland, and it costs money to do that. But each day that we don't do anything, the cost goes higher. So this sort of whole home approach and figuring out how we help seniors in particular, but how we keep households in the homes that they have that may be falling into disrepair, that may need new roofs, and how we coordinate with housing and other agencies will be critical. I can't speak strongly enough about the need to take a housing and approach. It's going to be housing and health, housing and economic development, housing and transportation, housing and education. The blueprint will not be able to do it all for poor students. We're going to need a strong housing policy to go with the blueprint. So with that, I just want to urge your favorable report for House Bill 79, and thank you so much for taking my testimony today.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 more people. So I'm going to call them up and then we'll entertain questions. Patrick Bigger is next. Patrick, if you could please come up and give us your 2 minutes, we'd appreciate that. And then next will be on deck Dominic Butchko. Dominic, you out there? Ah, there you are. Patrick, welcome to the committee.
Uh-oh, sorry, first time. Well, thank you very much for having me. My name is Dr. Patrick Bigger. I'm the research director at the Climate and Community Project, a resident of Newmarket, Maryland, and I'm excited to speak in favor of the Whole Homes Repair Act. Other testimony you'll hear will probably describe how the condition of many homes across the state just isn't good enough and how things will get worse as the impacts of climate change get more severe. You'll also hear about how homes will be repaired, how beneficiaries will be able to access further home upgrade incentives from the Federal Inflation Reduction Act, and how many good jobs will be created. Whole Homes Repair is an opportunity for Maryland to take the lead on the climate crisis and make sure that working people benefit directly. I want to use my time to highlight how Whole Homes Repair will actually change people's lives, and especially one person in particular, my mother-in-law, Laura Shaw. Laura is a retired widow living in Walkersville, Maryland, just on the other side of Frederick from me, with her developmentally disabled son, Joey. They live in the same 100-year-old house where she raised 4 kids, working full-time. It's a beautiful house, but it needs some work. The wiring hasn't been updated since the 50s. The fuel oil furnace went out a few years ago, but there's no money to fix it. Every winter, she has to buy a couple of cords of wood for the stove that heats just a couple of rooms, and then strategically navigate which bills get paid. And don't even get me started on the plumbing, or the insulation, or the backbreaking repairs that she's had to do herself just to keep her homeowner's insurance current. Whole Homes Repair will help Laura and Joey, and thousands of Marylanders like them, live safer, more comfortable lives. It will help Laura save money and even reduce her carbon footprint, which is something that's really hard for her to prioritize when she's trying to decide which bills get paid every month. The Whole Home Repairs Act will be transformative for people like Laura and Joey and people across the state, while bringing Maryland much closer to meeting its climate goals. So I hope you will report favorably upon it. Thank you.
Thank you. Dominic.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much for having me. Dominic Butchko with the Maryland Association of Counties. I'm going to be very quick. This is one of our famous Me Too moments. Last week we did a presentation and we talked about what is housing policy, what are the 3 things we're trying to do. This bill does 2 of them. It keeps people in their homes and it supports, it maintains affordable housing so we don't lose that stock. Good bill, phenomenal bill. Counties recommend a favorable report. Thank you.
All right, also Josh Tulkin and Gregory Countess. I don't see, oh, there's Josh. Oh, and there's Greg, okay.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, it's a pleasure to see you. Josh Tolkien on behalf of the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club, testifying in support. Right now, 20% of the state's greenhouse gas emissions comes from the burning of gas in our homes and our buildings. And the Maryland Climate Commission recommends that we fully electrify everything by 2030. Whether you agree with that or not, we know that's the direction that we're heading. 25% of households in Maryland are low-income households. We need a targeted strategy for trying to encourage energy efficiency and electrification. But in most cases, you won't find a win-win as much as you will on this policy. Being able to address health and safety and climate and energy efficiency at once will bring health benefits, economic benefits, and ultimately help save people money. The Sierra Club is strongly in support of this legislation. It addresses cura personalis, the whole person, and will allow people to be part of the solution to climate change while also encouraging and facilitating all of these other health benefits. We support some collaborative recommendations and amendments, I believe, being brought forward by Green and Healthy Homes Initiative, and we are proud to be in support of this bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. And Mr. Chair, a special thanks to you for helping me avoid my blunder last week. I am Greg Countess. I am the Director of Advocacy for Housing and Community Economic Development at Maryland Legal Aid. You know, a large part of the housing supply that our clients rent or live in is what's called naturally occurring affordable housing. And to break that down, it just simply is the folks in this particular market charge prices that are affordable to our clients, or it's affordable in terms of home ownership. This part of the market is particularly vulnerable because many of the owners of these homes do not have the capital available to them to keep down costs and continue to provide this housing that is both safe and habitable as well as affordable. This bill, as far as Maryland Legal Aid is concerned, alters the landscape. The bill incentivizes these owners to keep their houses and apartments affordable by allowing the conversion of a loan for the purposes of utility upgrades and repairs to a grant if certain benchmarks are met. This is a smart way to keep housing affordable, stabilize communities, improve our schools by lessening the churn caused by homelessness, and of course, preventing homelessness. And for that reason, we ask for a favorable report on this bill.
Very good then. Let's go to the questions. First question goes to Delegate Boyce.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And Delegate Stewart, thank you for this bill. So amazing and so needed and so timely. I had a couple of questions about, I have wrote down a lot of questions here, about the kind of renter-landlord portion of this. And first question essentially is, could we or are we rewarding bad landlords, those who, you know, are not keeping up properties to begin with, slum landlords who take advantage of individuals who do need housing, and therefore, hopefully, I guess, would see this, and I've been skimming the bill, maybe get some enhancements, but then, you know, I'd see there are protections to maintain the tenant, but is this rewarding bad landlords, slumlords?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Certainly, we hope not, right? And so I think the trick here, and I think the committee's, if this bill does move forward, and obviously there is a sizable fiscal note. I'll just sort of address the elephant in the room just briefly. And I know that if Delegate Wild Bill Wyvil was still here with us, he would be making that
The
making that
numbers
point
don't
himself.
number, he would tell you.
Yeah, I know, exactly. But, as Senator Saval said, we are hopeful that there are a lot of federal funds, especially in the Inflation Reduction Act, that we can use to fund the program. But on your point about the landlords, it's about getting the right balance, right? And I've talked to some of the folks at MMHA, and they've put together their own amendments. The trick here is we don't want every single small landlord under the sun to be able to qualify for this because,
Absolutely.
number one, it would be eaten up. All the money would be eaten up. And number two, we could be rewarding bad behavior.
Sure.
But at the same time, we don't want the provisions in the bill to be so restrictive that no one can benefit from it. And so it's about getting that right. I think that maybe in the version of the bill, depending on who you ask, we've either been too restrictive or too not restrictive enough. But I do think that, whether we add additional metrics to how landlords can apply or what they're eligible. Maybe if they haven't been cited, for example, for certain violations in recent years. There are definitely some ways that we could make sure that it's small landlords who are trying to provide housing as best they can. They don't necessarily have the resources and they need a little bit extra help to keep their tenant's house. Rewarding those people and not people who have been making their tenants live in substandard conditions for years and violating all sorts of code. But it's a great point.
Yeah, and I would just, one small pushback is that what would you say to individuals who would say it's not our responsibility to essentially help landlords maintain their properties? That's the landlord's responsibility. I see Ruth Ann like, burnt.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I may, there are, the way this is set up well in many places, the way we just recently set this up in Detroit, right, is the exceptions beyond the lowest income rental property owners is those issues of health and safety that are immediate for our elderly and our vulnerable children. So there are often, in our 99% reduction of childhood lead poisoning in this state, we made provisions that allowed us to go quickly and move quickly in those instances where rental property owners do not have the current resources to do something. Right. I think over time, one of the other things to think about in this bill is that we are going to be propelling a lot of cost savings, right, to help move this up through Medicaid savings and other potential reinvestment. But what it also allows us to do is have a better strategy of how we apply strategically and properly and equitably housing code enforcement.
That's great. And I was going to, I have two more questions, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind. I was going to ask, would Section 8 be allowed within this? A Section 8 landlord would be allowed?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, and I know the senator left before I can ask it, if we could find out of the $125 million he said they received with the rescue plan, how many quote-unquote repairs or homes did they?
I can get you that number because I have the whole house.
Awesome. And then my next question was about, so we know, and I think this is a big issue in this state in general or across the nation, is that once your home loan is paid off, you do not have to have homeowners insurance, and most people tend not to have homeowners insurance. Sometimes the houses get in disrepair, especially if you have an older home, and then they end up losing insurance, for instance, in some cases. So with this, and I'm a homeowner, I own my home outright, I don't have homeowner insurance. I go through this process and I get repairs. Would I then be required to get homeowners insurance?
Under the current rules at DHCD, they would require that, but there are also means to help homeowners. We run into this all the time. There are means to help homeowners get that insurance in order to qualify.
Okay.
So, and especially in a lot of our work that we do under a really unbelievable program that actually Civic Works and GHHI and others in Baltimore do, the housing upgrade benefits to seniors, that allows us to do this whole house work for seniors. We've been able to work out that mechanism. I can share that with you.
I would hope so. I think, personally, I'm just going to get on my soapbox about homeowners insurance. I know it's costly for some, but to not have it at all or be required not to have it just because of course, your mortgage is paid, I think is another creator of essentially housing instability and homelessness.
The soapbox can only be done in this form of a question.
Isn't that so?
Yes, it's so.
And
Right.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'll just answer your numbers question just briefly with just basic math, which is that if Pennsylvania had and they do the same cap we do, a $50,000 grant per home, and you have 125 million, simple math, that means you can help 2,500 households if the average grant actually is the max, which it wouldn't be, right? And if it was closer to, say, just for some ease of the math equation, because I had to go to law school and I had to be a legislator because I'm not good at math. But if the average was more like 5,000 and not 50,000, then obviously you're talking about 25,000 households at that point with that initial federal money that they use in Pennsylvania. So for not not spending any state money, that's pretty good to get somewhere between 2,500 and 25,000 households to get their repairs done for just the largesse of the Biden administration. That's a pretty good deal.
If I can add to that, in Pennsylvania, it's $15,000 a unit. But what we know is, having done an asset and gap analysis for the city of Baltimore, looking at this, looking at low-income housing and the need to do whole house, which GHHI is now launched in East Baltimore. The total gap for 1,000 homes was $7.2 million. And I can share that analysis and breakdown because we have existing programs that can be aligned, braided, and coordinated. And what this bill does is it creates that alignment and delivery system so we get away from fractured systems that would have an older adult having to go for 5, 6, 7 different grant programs and try to manage that versus a single delivery, single portal event taking comprehensive assessment that would allow us to better manage our funds at DHCD and at the local site.
Okay, let's try to keep our questions as compact as possible. The next question goes to Delegate Lehman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Delegate Stewart. This is a great bill. Great idea from our neighbors in Pennsylvania. So 2 questions. One is on this non-lapsing fund. I see the description of establishing the fund and, it being in Treasury, overseen by the comptroller. I don't see an amount. Are you recommending an amount or not? And if you're not, what are you thinking roughly, or do you not want to say?
I'm not recommending an amount. My hope for the committee, going back to the point I made about federal funding, is that we as a committee would pass the bill without any mandated appropriations in it, and that then we as a committee and we as individual legislators could go to our budget committees with our newfound power under question 1, as well as to our newfound administration to try to find some federal dollars to fund it. But it's silent on that. Pennsylvania is a bigger state than us. So if you extrapolated 125 million here, I think it would be more like 70 million or so, not to, but I'll gladly take more and I'll gladly accept less.
Okay, interesting.
If I can just quickly add to that, what we have done in other states, though, is also been able to bring in healthcare savings and reinvest that back. And over time, we are creating significant savings in Medicaid, Medicare, and hospital costs that should be really thought about as long-term in this, and is something that the new Secretary Herrera helped to launch. The stat I gave on the Amerigroup reinvestment of 32% savings per patient per month came in work that she helped to guide, and it's an important, groundbreaking way to do this as well.
Great, thank you. And then my second question, a little bit broader, but I don't feel like we heard as much about the worker piece of it, the worker training and employer component. Could you talk just a little bit more about that?
Be happy to. So when we look at a whole house approach and a comprehensive assessment approach, what we are doing is building on the skills of weatherization assistance program workers, those who do lead hazard control, or those that do home repair. As we upskill those workers by having that comprehensive set of training, as I noted, the Center for Employment Opportunities showed that there's a $4,000 to $8,000 jump in baseline wages, more likely to have long-term jobs as a contractor with benefits, and it also makes them simply more valuable in the market to be able to accomplish this in a more seamless way rather than a series of contractors coming into a home. So it lessens sort of the impact on the resident homeowner and improves the skilling upskilling, and opportunity actually to take underemployed and unemployed individuals into very good wage positions, family supportive wages through that work.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Before I recognize the next question, so let's say for the sake of argument, I am a moderate income individual, I own my house, I know that my house is costing me a lot of money because of lots of energy-related stuff. Do we have somewhere a list of what resources that we currently have? I seem to remember, maybe this is a long time ago and maybe it's a bill that didn't pass, I seem to remember some sort of a tax credit for having a person do an energy assessment, or is that something BG&E does? What exactly is available right now?
Now, so you can get rebates through Empower, you can get rebates through the federal government under the Inflation Reduction Act for this. There will be a total of up to $14,000 of tax credits and rebates available related to energy efficiency, some of that related to electrification work. And the one concern I would say on, if I can, on low-income individuals that we have to pay attention to is how we get those tax credits and rebates converted so it's accessible for lower income, but they are available. There is a, and I can share.
They're not refundable, I assume.
No. And but I can share with the committee the resources
Yeah,
that
I'd
exist on energy efficiency and weatherization, both resources where you can get grants and those.
I think it would be really useful for the members of my committee to have a summary, a 1 or 2 page summary of what currently exists, because I think, anyway. Next question goes to, let me turn you off, Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is questions for Ruth Ann Norton. You said something earlier about, they asked you about future funding source, and I hope I didn't miss something in between, but you know, I'm always curious as to where the money's going to come from. So.
Yeah, me too.
Could you help me out with that?
Sure. So the way this is looked at, so what the whole House bills do in effect over time, right, is the fund is funding the gap that exists between how the weatherization assistance money, the climate-related dollars, the lead hazard control, the asthma reduction, trip and fall, and those dollars on home repair that exist, when you bring those together to try to do sort of the more whole house approach, right? You will often have a gap that may exist in that for another $500 or $1,500 or depending on qualifications of the locality, right? So that's why you have over time, the whole house approach is that you're really driving that gap. What this pilot project would do is, I best read it, but I'll always defer to the delegate, and what the Pennsylvania program is doing is actually funding that to be just simply more effective and efficient in its delivery and be faster on those fairly significant outcomes on housing stability, on health, on lowering energy cost. But over time, the way you have the most effective delivery is taking in. Maryland will get about $100 million a year from the Inflation Reduction Act and Bipartisan Infrastructure Act and current federal budgets over the next 3 to 5 years, just to augment what we already have on that. So that's a large part of those dollars. There's a $500 million a year that comes out of the federal government for lead hazard control and asthma reduction. There's money for fall prevention, but not enough money for fall prevention, which has its highest return on investment. So part of this will help to do is that housing upgrade benefits for seniors approach that we do in Baltimore. This would make this statewide. So you have an alignment of programs, and then this is funding that gap, which we have shown through analysis, in which CMS and the World Health Organization noted as sort of a best practice, emerging best practice for now and the future, is the tying into the reimbursement of health benefits, which I
So-
can.
So
Free
most
flow.
of this is subsidy. You're not looking at collecting a fee from any source.
That's not how this legislation is written and not how any of the whole house programs are designed throughout the country.
Well, I just wanted to verify that. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again. This is a really great concept. I'm still trying to understand it, so I want to ask a couple more questions.
I'll invite you on a tour to see the work if you'd like, if the chairman so would like to do that.
Sounds wonderful. I have one question is, I'm sorry. Field trip. Yes. So I just want to clarify what you just said, which is you're talking about actually pooling all or several of the resources that are out there into one program that is doing all of these things. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm just being pulled to another hearing, so I'm just letting them know.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. And you may not even be the right person to answer the rest of my questions. I just wanted to get that one out of the way. Is this, a delegate, is this visualized eventually as becoming a revolving fund where, you know, it gets used? I mean, there's going to be value added to these homes, right? I mean, once these repairs are done, from something that's been kind of run down and decrepit to being more livable, is there any visualization of that money getting plowed back into the program at some point?
That would be great. That would be great if we could achieve that after the pilot program was over, but I think ultimately it'll be the will of the General Assembly about how many dollars we get, how far we can stretch those dollars, how successful the pilot program was, and where we go from there.
Okay.
I think the answer, I mean, that is, what the pilot allows you to do is effectively look at what you're going to get on those loans, the 5-year forgivable loans, if there's any capture on that, the health savings capture. One thing that, Delegate Healy, that I think is also important here is there is an 8-to-1 racial equity gap for Black and brown low-income homeowners. And in terms of the value of their home and the ability to have intergenerational wealth transfer. And what we are creating in the private market is also closing that gap because we're increasing the value of the home and the stability of a home for older adults to age in place and be able to pass that real estate asset for everyone, right? In this, to pass that to the next generation. But we also are achieving a good bit of market value increase and intergenerational wealth transfer here that
Well, yeah,
comes
I
back
mean,
to the state in many other ways.
I understand what you're saying, but that can be a two-edged sword, as we've seen as property values go up, and then everybody's property values go up, and then these properties are worth more in the marketplace, but they're unaffordable to lower-income people.
I think for the very lowest communities, the income communities that we're talking about, and I will tell you that we have studied this through the Lead Hazard Control Program at HUD for the last 30 years, and there has been no data to actually, which I'll share with you, no data to show that it moves, those housing interventions alone move to the unaffordable category.
Oh, yeah, I guess
That's different.
where you have concentrations of poverty, I understand that, but if
Yeah.
you have spotted, you know, more integrated, which we want, it's, we'll talk offline.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely, important to do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Healy almost asked this question, but I'm just going to say it more directly. What's to stop a landlord from just jacking up the rent because now it's a nicer house?
The provisions of the bill prevent that. So there are some safeguards in the bill, and this is a little bit what I was talking to Delegate Boyce about. There are some safeguards to prevent landlords from large rent increases or from evictions or from lease non-renewals. So any dollars that we give to these small landlords will have strings attached to make sure that bad actors don't come in, take the money, and run. Yeah.
Delegate, before, that's all the people who are signed up favorable. There is some favorable Fifth Amendment written testimony, and I noticed the realtors are listed favorable with amendments. Have you read their testimony, and what's the?
Yeah, I did, and I think that their issue relates back to the one we just talked about. They and some of the other landlords are just interested in trying to get this mix right, whereby trying to make sure that bad actor landlords don't come in and swoop in and get the money. They're concerned that maybe we went a little bit too far with the language and that we're too strict on landlords, and that basically we're asking too much of them and that not enough of them will be able to apply. So I'm open. I've already had a conversation with the realtors and I'm open to that idea. And I think finding that balance would be, I think, a task, unfortunately, for Delegate Holmes' subcommittee to add more work. But, I think that probably is one of the few sort of amendment tweaks that we may have to kind of give and take on to figure out what the right balance is. Obviously, the big hurdle with the bill is funding. But again, I'm hoping that the federal government will bail us out there.
Okay. Several people are signed up unfavorably, but none of them are testifying.
Yeah,
so
I think this is the United Nations Brigade.
You think?
Yeah.
Okay, and with that, we conclude the public hearing on House Bill 79. Ruth Ann, you're free to go elsewhere.
Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you for having us.
Good to see you, too. Okay, we're going to go to House Bill 60, also Delegate Stewart, and you've got 4 minutes to present your bill.
Right when you guys started to get sick of me, I'm back. This is House Bill 60, the Housing Innovation Pilot Program Act, another fun bill that we can spend money on housing. So this bill is a little bit more simple, it's a little bit shorter, and it basically would create another pilot program to, this time instead of repairing homes, we're talking about funding the construction of new affordable housing. And specifically what this bill would envision is providing matching dollars to public housing authorities, but not just any public housing authority, a public housing authority that's really doing some innovative work in the state, using some innovative financing schemes to create mixed income public housing. And the exemplar here, and not to sort of be biased towards my own county, but the exemplar here is Montgomery County's Public Housing Authority, which is called the Housing Opportunities Commission, HOC. They have garnered a wide array of national press in recent months for what they've been able to pull off, which is basically by being seeded, and we'll hear from them earlier, and I may be slightly fudging the numbers here, which honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if I am, because they blow me away, Mr. Chairman, which is that with a very small seed investment from the Montgomery County Council of something around $3 million a year, HOC has been able to leverage those dollars into $250 million of affordable housing construction by floating their own bonds, by doing some public-private partnerships. It's astounding. They're actually estimating with just that very small amount of money that, I'm sure a lot of folks are familiar. If you're not, I'm happy to send you a report, but the Metro Washington Council of Governments releases housing targets for what each county needs to produce to close the housing supply shortfall. And Montgomery County's housing targets are unfortunately really high. We've got a big affordability problem in Montgomery County.
Hey, could you get me a copy of that?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So here's the cool part, is that HOC is projecting that they may, with that very small money from just the county council, they may be able to hit 15% of that MCOG, Metro Washington Council of Governments target just alone. Not even bringing in any private sector developments, not even bringing in any nonprofit developers, what they may do in partnership, just with that small amount of money, 15%. So therefore, if they get a matching fund from this bill, or if they provide some more funding and get matching dollars from the state, we could be talking somewhere in the ballpark of a third or 40% of our total target, which a lot of policymakers in Montgomery County thought was unachievable, that we would ever hit. The target was so high, it was a great goal, but it was pie in the sky. We're talking about with a relatively small amount of dollars, because of the innovative things they've been able to do at HOC, we could hit almost half with just a little bit more seed money from the state. Some of which, again, not to be a broken record, will hopefully come from the federal government as well. So we're going to have Ken Silverman from HOC talk more. I'm happy to, I think maybe in the future a briefing from HOC may be interesting. But I would be remiss if I didn't add that obviously I'm not trying to create this bill selfishly to reward my own county, though, hey, that'd be fine. I'm hoping that other counties, and I've heard from other counties, that they want to take the HOC model and run with it themselves. So really what we're trying to do with this bill is not only reward counties that are doing great things, but also incent other counties to be similarly active in this space, because we have a huge affordable housing crisis in this state. As many of y'all know, and as we'll continue to hear throughout this session, we need 125,000 households across the state just for the extremely low income. Not counting regular low income, not counting working class people or moderate income. We need 125,000 just for the extremely low income.
Yeah, I was going to say that estimate that that Claudia had of like 70-something, not being critical, but it sounded low.
Yeah, so that's just the extreme. So anyway, so in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, we've built a big coalition behind this bill. You read off some, but I mean, we've got MACO, we've got public housing authorities, we've got counties, we've got disability advocates, realtors, landlords, environmental groups, affordable housing providers, advocates for the poor. We got the Catholic Conference. It's a big coalition because I think a lot of people recognize that we need to do something big on housing, and this bill provides us opportunity to spend a relatively small amount of money to make a big difference, and I urge a favorable report.
Okay, well, let me call up first Claudia, Dominic, Gregory, and Ken Silverman, even though he's signed up favorable with amendments. Let's call all four of you up, and then I will take the two virtual witnesses and we'll go to questions. That's what we'll do. So whoever would like to go first, give us your best 2 minutes. I like what I heard.
You want to go first?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, still Dom, still from MACO. This is an example of a great bill, also a Me Too movement. As the delegate pointed out, this has a great multiplier effect on public resources. And as I said last week in the briefing, we need to build affordable housing. That's one of the 3 things that we need to do, and this bill accomplishes that. So counties urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Sure. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Ken Silverman with the Housing Opportunities Commission of Montgomery County. We're the county's public housing authority. We serve almost 15,000 low and moderate income households in the county. We strongly support this legislation. Really excited to be here to talk about it. In 2021, Montgomery County partnered with HOC to provide the debt service resources to allow us to create a $100 million housing production fund. We were able to very quickly invest those resources into the first 2 projects, which are projected to deliver over 700 units of new housing in the next 2 years. At least 30% of those units will be affordable, 20% below 50% AMI. These 2 projects are the Laureate, which is a transit-oriented development at the Shady Grove Metro and is expected to begin leasing this spring. And then Hillendale Gateway, which is in the eastern part of the county. We're expecting to begin site work in April. And that project has 2 buildings, one senior, which is expected to be Maryland's first passive house, net zero, multifamily residential building. These projects will remain in public ownership in perpetuity, which means ongoing affordability, the ability to provide wraparound services, and the ability to provide enhanced stability for tenants. We're very proud that this model has attracted national attention, and there is legislation to adopt versions of this approach introduced in California, Washington State, Washington, D.C., Maine, and Rhode Island. A statewide housing innovation fund would allow us to potentially double the amount of housing that we can produce with this housing production fund. And we greatly appreciate that the design of the proposed innovation fund is very flexible, so it would allow each jurisdiction to develop a local funding model that matches their structure, institution, and needs. We very much appreciate Delegate Stewart's willingness to work with us on some amendments that make the bill compatible with the existing standards for affordable housing in state and federal law. We thank you for your time and support of affordable housing in Maryland.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to go next? Claudia, perhaps?
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. My name is Claudia Wilson-Randall. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Development Network of Maryland. The Community Development Network promotes, strengthens, and advocates for the community development sector throughout Maryland's urban, suburban, and rural communities. I just want to really echo what my colleagues have already talked about. Local governments and the development community needs more funds that are flexible to produce and preserve affordable housing across the state of Maryland. And in order for Maryland to be a state with opportunity, decision makers will need to invest in the intersection between housing and other assets within the community, like transportation, health, and economic development that I've already spoken about. I also just want to say that this bill, there are existing funds for rental housing production in the state of Maryland, but there needs to be funds that are more flexible and that leverage other types of funds. So Montgomery County has proudly stated their case, but I will also say that rural communities within the state really need help and really need other types of flexibility of funds in order to produce more affordable housing units. It's really critical that we also find ways for them to be innovative, to layer and stack funding with private and local sources of funds. And I think that it is really the foundation of the work on economic development throughout the state. These sorts of funds will be critical in connecting to other sorts of job and workforce development and aims that the state has. So with that, I'm going to stop and just thank you for your time. I will continue to work with the sponsor in tweaking this bill, but I ask for your favorable report for House Bill 60. Thank you so much.
Gregory, what say you to the bill by Boyd Genius from District 19?
I say thumbs up, as the Romans would do. My name is Gregory Countess. I am a Director of Advocacy for Housing and Community Development at the Maryland Legal Aid Bureau, and we would urge a favorable report on HB 60, a bill that we think will not only provide for the building of permanent affordable rental housing, but also will break the bonds of social stratification that are now currently present in far too many public housing buildings. I would hope that besides building new housing, that this bill would be, bless you by the way, that this bill would be available to help to preserve affordable housing or public housing that already exists. As this committee knows, public housing agencies are hundreds of billions of dollars underwater in terms of meeting their capital needs and costs. You've read and heard the stories: broken elevators, rodent infestation, leaking roofs, and units that were built 50 or 60 years ago that are increasingly becoming obsolete. This bill, by providing a funding source that is tied to reversing the mistakes, the policy mistakes of years ago, by financing development efforts which will transform poor neighborhoods and provide economic connectedness. That's a term that's used, I think, in some of these studies. We believe that this bill will put those communities truly on a path to economic mobility, those residents of those buildings. And we hope and we believe that this legislation is the first step out of building a path out of the revolving door of poverty. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to two virtual witnesses, Doug Ryan and, well, let's go to Doug Ryan. Doug Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Doug Ryan. I am the Vice President of Policy and Applied Research at Prosperity Now. We're a Washington, D.C.-based nonprofit that works on wealth and asset building for families across America. I am also a resident of District 16, a longtime resident of Montgomery County. And for 13 years, I worked at the Housing Opportunities Commission. I left there about 10 years ago. So I've worked in affordable housing my entire life, and I urge a favorable reporting of this legislation. And I want to thank Delegate Stewart for his work on this. Just a couple of highlights, just to reiterate a lot of what the other panelists have said. This is a really important opportunity for the legislator to really make some progress in the housing space. For example, we know that in October, the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments released its multifamily rental housing construction indicators report and noted that Montgomery County and Prince George's County are lagging far behind Washington, D.C. and Northern Virginia in the production of multifamily housing, just as a share of its population. So we are falling behind. Recent reporting documented how that the economy of the state of Maryland has lagged behind the nation, but also our neighboring states. And part of the driver of that economic problem is our lack of housing and housing opportunities for families across the state. According to our analyses, about half of Maryland renters are cost burdened, meaning that they spend more than 30% of their income on housing. And that simply means that any income disruption, health crisis, or other action could really put them out onto the streets. And we don't need another eviction crisis that we were so fearful during the pandemic. And of course, the cost burdens are disproportionately impactful on Black and Latino Marylanders. There's a really great opportunity to leverage the great work of housing authorities across the state, including HOC and others. This is a unique opportunity to reach lower income families that aren't served by other housing programs, and frankly, an opportunity to start the ball rolling in progress for the state of Maryland. Thank you, and again, I request a favorable report for the bill.
Thank you. And finally, let's turn to Paul Williams with the Center for Public Enterprise. Paul.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. It's any indication how excited I am about this piece of legislation. I am coming to you from my vacation in Paris today. I just wanted to give a little bit of context to what Montgomery County's Housing Opportunities Commission is up to and how that has kind of impacted the rest of the country. So a lot of the work that my organization does is talking with public agencies and legislators around the country who are interested in undertaking, development with models that can help rebuild public sector capacity. The American public sector had a lot of capacity to do development and infrastructure construction work, in the middle of the century, and a lot of that kind of fell away the past few decades. And kind of as a result, as we heard from others who spoke just before me, a lot of public housing authorities around the country are really saddled with debt, they're underwater, and they don't have a lot of that capacity left anymore. HOC is kind of an exception to that, and HOC has really found a way to produce more affordable housing than a lot of their peer PHAs, because they've used these innovative financing models that allow them to build affordable housing without the use of tax credits that most other affordable housing relies on. And that's really something that if it can be expanded is a model to rebuild some of that capacity in public housing authorities and kind of bring them into the fold in helping to solve the housing crisis and the affordable housing crisis. And for a little bit of the national context, there are efforts and interest from legislators and bureaucrats in several different states around the country who are hoping to kind of copy this model. So spreading it around Maryland, it seems like an excellent opportunity to me. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. This is a committee first. We've never had testimony from Paris, France, which it's right now 9:58 in the evening. So another bold step forward. Any questions for, we've got Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I find this bill very interesting, and I'm very optimistic about it. Thank you for bringing it, Delegate Stewart. I wonder if Mr. Silverman or maybe somebody else could tell us more about how you take a relatively small amount of money and turn it into significant investment in housing.
Sure. And so in the case of the local fund, it's an annual appropriation. So it's an agreement between the county and HOC where the county agrees to provide a total. It was done in two $50 million tranches. So the total is about $3 million per year over 20 years. And that allows HOC to issue bonds that get us to $100 million The first 50 million was issued in 2021 when interest rates were quite favorable, and the total appropriation for that 50 million was only about $500,000 when you net out the interest that the projects pay back to the fund. The second 50 million obviously cost quite a bit more because that was done a year later in 2022. So, those bond funds go into this housing production fund, which is controlled by HOC under an agreement with the county. And then we loan the money to a project. The project gets constructed after about 5 years. When it's built and leased up, it can refinance and then repay the funds into the housing production fund. There is an interest that the project pays that goes back to the county to help offset the debt service costs. And then the principal is ready to be invested into a new project. So after 20 years, when the bonds are paid off, we will still have this $100 million revolving over and over again. We estimate each revolution could produce about 1,500 units of housing.
Okay, thank you.
So before I recognize Delegate Ruth, so the Montgomery County government appropriates $3 million a year over the course of 30 years?
20 years.
20 years, okay. And that allows HOC to use that chunk of government money to float a bond.
Yes, sir.
And they pay out of their budget the principal and interest of the bond.
Yeah, that $3 million is the principal and interest payment, and having that
for the first year.
Montgomery County will pay us that money each year for 20 years.
And that's used for principal and interest?
Correct.
And so what kind of debt is this? Is this like, it's an HOC bond, so it's not a general what kind of debt is it?
It's akin to like a revenue bond, but by having this, being backed by this agreement with the county, it gets us, which has a AAA rating, it gets us a much more favorable interest rate. It is a tax-exempt bond.
Okay, next question goes to Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this question, I guess, is also for Ken Silverman. And, obviously, there's a shortage of affordable housing statewide, and including in my own county. And I just wondered if you could speak to, how many units are needed in Montgomery County, and how quickly you're able to move forward in filling that gap.
Sure. So as Delegate Stewart mentioned, the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments did a big study of the whole DC region where they created housing targets for each jurisdiction and for the region as a whole based on their projections of how many people would be coming to the county. For Montgomery County, our projection is to try to meet about 3,300 new housing units every year. The county has not met that target yet, and that includes private, nonprofit, affordable, HOC, everybody. And so we continue to fall further behind our target. As I said, this housing production fund is projected to produce about 1,500 units in each 5-year rotation. So if we were able to match that 1-to-1 and have an additional potentially $100 million of investment from a state fund, that could produce another 1,500 units over 5 years, which would be a significant portion. The COG goals do break down based on affordability. They take the projected incomes of the people that are coming, and they estimate that almost 80% of those units, or of the people coming, would need to be at least a moderate income level. And so the ability to provide a portion of these units at affordable and then at very affordable levels help us to serve those people. And then because they're owned by the Public Housing Authority, we then have the ability to potentially layer in vouchers and other tools to serve extremely low income households as well.
Thank you. Sorry.
Vice Chair of the Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Delegate, this seems like a great bill, very innovative. Being from Baltimore County, I took a look at the favorable with amendments letter from Baltimore County, which, among other things, requests an amendment that would allow funds to be provided to other local agencies and for projects led by nonprofit and for-profit developers, and to take out the requirement that the bill solely apply to publicly owned projects. So I don't know if those potential amendments you've considered yet, or any feedback on that?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I did see that testimony yesterday from Baltimore County. And, you know, obviously the goal, the original purpose of the bill, because we do have several other housing funds that are geared specifically towards nonprofit affordable housing providers. The idea behind this bill was, let's create a fund that's basically just for public housing authorities that doesn't dilute or take any money from those other funds, so that we're not essentially clawing away their money, but instead creating this new funding stream, hopefully from federal dollars, that's specifically targeted to public housing authorities. Now, that said, if it's the will of the committee to open this up and to try to have these same dollars flow to counties that rely more heavily on nonprofits, I'm not opposed to that if that's what it takes to get these
Delegate,
dollars allocated.
Let me follow up on my vice chair.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that disrupt the nature of the kind of debt that you're envisioning? I mean, could that even be, wouldn't that kind of an amendment possibly just damage what you're trying to do?
I think it would. Yeah. I think that really what we're trying to do is reward housing authorities that are basically taking the fewest amount of dollars and leveraging it for the maximum amount of housing units. And so I do worry that if by watering it down and opening it up to counties that are operating systems that may rely more heavily or on more expensive bonds, maybe that would be counterproductive. But Mr. Silverman, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Maybe to the extent that you work with nonprofit developers and to the
Yeah, we are eager to work. We have a number of significant nonprofit affordable housing developers in Montgomery County. We work closely with them. Actually, both of the projects that I mentioned are partnerships with actually for-profit developers in Montgomery County, but they, because of the HOC investment, HOC will be the at least majority owner of every project that we do with this public money. But we are able to partner with anybody that wants to build housing in our county, and we do that with the local fund as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again, Delegate Stewart, for an excellent bill. I was wondering if any of you could comment on whether there is one agreed-upon source of information on the gap in affordable units in each county, because we've already heard different numbers kind of tossed around today. And I ask that because I assume you'll want to know that to help prioritize how this funding is awarded.
There are several different groups, and you honestly may be the best equipped to answer this. I'll give you a chance. But yeah, there's the low-income Housing Tax Coalition. That's exactly right. That LIHTC. That's where I got that 125,000 number for. There's also the Housing Needs Assessment that was done a couple of years ago by the Department of Housing and Community Development. But there are multiple, and I don't think that there's really a correct one.
Yeah, and there's the Maryland Affordable Housing Coalition. There's a lot of groups. There's also a lot of financing, right? So I do think that one of the questions that I asked about this particular bill was, could this be put with one of the existing funds that we have? But I think that in terms of what we're trying to do with this bill and this type of innovation, it may be helpful to have a separate fund to do this very type of financing. But I will say that for many deals, and HOC can talk about this, you're layering financing. So you have low-income housing tax credits along with other types of rental housing partnership, rental housing works, partnership rental housing programs. So they're now an emergency developers fund. There's a lot of different layering of funding. So that makes the deals different.
Right, but isn't it also somewhat fluid, given that, first of all, one of the definitions of affordability is the percentage of, income that a person is spending on their housing, correct? And right now, rents are really spiking because we have few, if any, rent, control or rent stabilization, Mr. Chairman. I know that kind of gets you here.
Yeah.
Rent stabilization laws on
Yeah.
the books in this state.
That number definitely is always fluctuating, right? Because it is tied to a particular unit is unaffordable for a particular family if it exceeds 30% of their income. That's what makes it unaffordable. That's when you're what's called rent burden, is if you're spending more than a third, basically, of your income on rent. So that number is constantly fluctuating. If it went up dramatically in the course of the pandemic, it's come down, I think, a little bit since then. But to Mr. Chairman's point, it's big. No matter who you ask, the number is huge, and we're not making enough progress. And the thing to remember, too, is just because it's 125,000 now, if HOC builds 5,000 units and it goes down to 120,000, that's great. But guess what? More low-income people are still moving to Maryland and need housing. So the number is only going to go up. It's not going to go down unless we get much more aggressive about building new housing units.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question quickly is this innovation fund to be used only to build new units, or can it be used to fix additional units? Fix existing units, especially those, like I'm thinking of the only public housing I have in College Park is an aging building for seniors and disabled folks on Rhode Island Avenue. And we actually got some bond money for that building last year. But there's probably 10 or 15 units in the building that were flooded years ago, and they've never really been able to properly bring them back up to code.
Yeah.
In that scenario, would that public housing authority be eligible, or are you trying to focus on just new units?
So what we're trying to focus on is both the new construction and of new units by a public housing authority, and the acquisition of private housing stock, some of which have gone into disrepair, that HOC either has or is at least interested in acquiring and bringing into the orbit of HOC. And the bill could be used for both of those purposes. I don't think that it would be eligible for sort of a strict repair, but that said, if dollars flowed from this program to a public housing authority, they could use that for their construction side, but it could also help stabilize the housing agency to have more money left in their budget for repairs of existing stock. And that's also something that I'd be open to, if that was the will of the committee to expand that and allow more repair. Obviously, the previous bill was more focused on repairs, but obviously in the home ownership capacity, this bill focuses obviously on public housing, and there are significant challenges with repairs, including in the city that we're all sitting in today. So I'm sympathetic to the issue. We're mostly focused on new construction because we have this huge gap, but I'm not opposed to tweaking the bill in that capacity if that was the will of the committee.
Thank you.
Yeah, before I conclude the public hearing on this bill, for the record, I've always opposed price and rent control in the private sector. I've never opposed it in the public sector for the same reason that I support Medicare and Medicaid. The federal government is spending the money, so yes, of course, they should be able to say what an anesthesiologist gets. They're spending the money. And so I don't regard this bill as running afoul, at least in my case, of that red line that I personally have. But okay, well, that concludes the very interesting bill. I understand it's in the EEE committee on the Senate side, so okay, that ends the public hearing on House Bill 60. But there are a large number of people who signed up written opposition to the bill. Nobody has signed up to actually testify. So we'll move on to Delegate Stein, House Bill 102.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Can I bring it up?
Yep, go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. For the record, Delegate Dana Stein. This is a reintroduction of last year's House Bill 1064, which passed this committee 24-1, passed the House 131-1. That's it, I know. We didn't get unanimous, but after that, it disappeared into the Senate. So, of course, in this committee, given its housing jurisdiction, we hear a lot of bills relating to the issue of tenant evictions. But there's one situation that we hadn't considered before, and that's what happens to pets, particularly cats and dogs, when a tenant is evicted and all of their belongings are put out on the curb. Now, many sheriffs and landlords are conscientious and will do their best if they find an animal to connect the pet with animal control or a shelter. But sometimes they don't realize that an animal is actually in the apartment that's being vacated. And so as a result, the animal ends up being by itself, potentially for weeks, may starve to death. And even when an animal is saved by animal control, the agency wouldn't know who the owner is, and vice versa. So frequently the tenant who's lost their apartment wouldn't be able to be reconnected with their pet. So what this bill has is several provisions to protect pets and their owners. And here, for the purposes of this bill, we're defining pets to be cats and dogs. So after an eviction, the sheriff or their constable must immediately check the property for pets. If a pet is found and the tenant isn't on the premises, then the sheriff must contact the local animal shelter or animal rescue group to have them pick up the pet. If a pet is taken to a shelter, the shelter should have the name and contact information of the owner, and the owner, the tenant, should be given information about which shelter their pet was taken to. So again, the idea is to be able to reconnect the tenant with their pet. No pets can be left with property after an eviction on the curb. And then we try to be somewhat proactive in saying that the Department of Agriculture is to create a fact sheet with resources for pet owners facing evictions. A description of the fact sheet is to be provided to tenants who have pets, and then also to all tenants when they are facing eviction. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I urge a favorable report and turn things over to the advocates.
Well, before we go to the advocates, what happened to this bill? Where did it just sit in JPR? Is that what happened?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. No vote.
No vote. But we didn't get it to them at the last minute. It
just sat.
Okay. Well, let me just say this to the member before I start to recognize the advocates and, of course, questions and all that. This is one of those many bills where it passed out of our committee. It passed nearly unanimously. We're going to pass this bill unless something truly radical happens. So there is no need to reinvent the wheel here with testimony or questions, unless we have a new member of the committee who has a genuine question, and I don't want to restrain that in any way. So, having said that, who would like to give us the first testimony?
Good afternoon, Chair Barve, Vice Chair Stein, members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. Good afternoon. Nice to see everybody today. My name is Lisa Radov. I'm the President and Chairman of Maryland Votes for Animals. We work on humane legislation to improve the lives of animals and people in Maryland. I'm here in support of HB 102. I think that Chairman Barve basically laid it out in terms of what you're going to be doing with this bill, so I don't want to reinvent the wheel. And just to tell you that this bill, we heard not only from pet owners, but also from shelters, rescues, and animal control, that they were getting animals, and they knew that they were someone's animals, but they didn't know whose animals and didn't know what to do with them. So there are a lot of different groups that are affected by this bill. This bill keeps people and pets together. It codifies a process such that landlords will be following best practices. So with that, I want to keep it brief and say thank you. Thank you to Vice Chair Stein for reintroducing this bill. This is a humane and compassionate bill. Let's keep pets together with their owners in Maryland this year.
Hey, just quickly, Dana, any business groups opposed to this bill?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Who'd like to go next?
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. Thank you so much for allowing me to testify today. I will keep it brief. My name is Katie Flory. I am the Community Care and Advocacy Director for the Maryland SPCA in Baltimore City. And I'm also representing PAWS, which is the Professional Animal Workers Society. I had a great spiel ready for you guys. I'll make it quick, but I just ask any of you that are really maybe kind of teetering on this, please imagine coming home and being evicted and being in a crisis situation and not knowing what to do and not know where to go, and now you don't know where your animal is. This is an easy solution to a problem that faces my shelter along with all of the shelters across the state and unfortunately millions of people. I know you all will pass this favorably, and I thank you so much for your time.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Alexis Prisco, and I am a high school senior at Eastern Technical High School in District 7. Last year, I lost my best friend. He was a cat named Lance, and he was the love of my life. He was a very sweet, loving animal, and his passing broke my heart. My mom, who is a fellow animal lover like me, quickly began looking for someone to add into our family. And we found a ginger kitten who was surrendered to the Maryland SPCA because his owners were evicted. This cat's name is Simba, and he has been lucky enough to live in a warm home for the past 2 years because his owners knew their rights and responsibilities as pet owners. However, other animals have been left out in the cold because their owners are not as aware or able to help them. HB 102 not only protects animals, but it gives evicted families one less thing to worry about. As part of this bill, owners would be given a fact sheet by the Department of Agriculture as well as the rights and responsibilities of them in order to best understand their options so that they can find safe homes, whether temporary or permanent, for their pets. Although COVID-19 rates continue to fall, Maryland eviction rates have begun to climb back towards pre-pandemic levels. And during the summer of 2022 alone, over 4,000 renters were evicted, according to an article by the Baltimore Banner. Given that 72% of renters have pets, we can extrapolate that nearly 2,900 pets were affected by these evictions. As COVID eviction bills begin to expire, this issue is in dire need of attention for not only the safety of our animals, but the sanity of pet owners. Thank you for the opportunity to present my testimony, and I urge the committee to issue a favorable report.
Thank you very much. We always love it when articulate high school students come to our committee. We also have signed up to testify Emily Hovermel, yep, there you are, Jennifer Bevan Dangle, Donna Bernstein, and then we have 3 people who are testifying remotely who we will go to in order. Okay. Who'd like to go first?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Emily Hovermail on behalf of the Humane Rescue Alliance. We are the largest animal services provider in our region, touching the lives of over 100,000 animals annually through our adoption, community veterinary care, and other support services. Last year, we helped over 4,000 Maryland families find their new animal companions. I think I heard the man at the top of the table say not to reinvent the wheel, so I will just say that we are very much in support of this legislation. If it seems like these practices are common sense, it's because they are, and we hope that the committee will once again vote to favorably pass this legislation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Bevan Dangle. I'm the Maryland State Director for the Humane Society of the United States. I do want to reiterate that there is no opposition here today against this bill. We're very grateful to the hard work of the subcommittee, in particular, the hard work of MMHA, helping us sort of craft a piece of legislation that could be very successful last year. And we would hope that the bill could move in more or less the same format, given the hard work that happened last year and the fact that it did basically run out of time on the Senate side. So, me too.
Yeah, the MMHA for the new members of the committee, the landlords, the property owners. Right. Okay, Donna Bernstein. There you are.
Good afternoon, members of the committee, Chairman. I'm an attorney with the Legal Aid Bureau, and I think in the past you've heard all of the the people who support the animals and the pet owner, the bond between the pet owner and the animals. But I just wanted to reiterate that what you'll hear, I think, from the public health speaker, that this bill really has the potential to be much greater than, it's very important to end animal suffering and to keep the human-animal bond. It's been scientifically proven that maintaining housing and an attachment to an animal has ended up being, or has produced much better medical outcomes for low-income people. So with that in mind, I've worked for many years at Legal Aid, and all that time I have tried to make the clients that come in, I of course help them with their legal issue, but I also put them in touch with resources that help to improve or support pet ownership and also to improve their quality of life. But that's only for people who come to me with an issue. What I've been working for many, many years on is trying to lay some groundwork for pets themselves to be to produce resources and value for beyond the obvious for low-income people. And this bill definitely is laying the groundwork for that, because what the bill requires that the tenant be provided with, and with the shelter, that the information the shelter has to have, then puts them in touch with a huge number of free resources which support pet ownership, but also will help to reduce the person's chances of becoming homeless. Perfect. No, that was it. Right on the mark.
Perfect timing then. Okay, we have three virtual witnesses, Paul Locke, Charmaine Miller, and Kimberly Egan. Will go to Paul Locke first. Mr. Locke, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. I want to thank you for giving me the chance to testify. My goal here today is to be brief and to be as articulate as the high school student who preceded me. I'm an associate professor at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, and I want to speak in strong support of this bill for 2 reasons. The first reason is, before I became an associate professor, I was an attorney in active practice. I was mostly an environmental attorney, but I did a fair amount of real estate work. And the type of disclosure in this law is very consistent, very standard practice for real estate. I see it as a light touch, and I don't see it as anything that is going to be burdensome in terms of what would fall on tenants or landlords. Second, and more importantly, my research here at Hopkins has involved looking at the companion animal bond through something we call the One Health approach. And the basic idea of the One Health approach is that when humans and their companion animals are together, it does strengthen the human's ability to be a healthy person. And this bill falls squarely into really supporting the One Health approach. So for those reasons, I'm standing in full support of the bill, and I would be glad to share my research with the committee if that's appropriate. And again, I just want to thank you very much for giving me the chance to spend this minute and a half with you.
Thank you very much. Charmaine Miller is not with us, so we will go straight to Kimberly Egan. Ms. Egan, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, I hope I am in better focus on your screen than I am in on my own.
Well, we can hear you. That's the positive thing.
Okay, my name is Kim Egan. I'm the president of the Maryland Horse Council. We advocate for horses from all walks of life all over the state of Maryland. We love this bill. Our only request is that you consider including horses. Horses live as pets with many private horse owners on residential properties that are leased. And when the tenants are forced to leave in a hurry, their horses suffer the same way dogs and cats do. The only difference is it is actually kind of hard to find a home for a horse in a hurry. And so we understand there's a desire to keep this narrow, but we plead for your sympathy on behalf of the horses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for any of these witnesses on a bill that passed with only 1 negative vote on the floor of the House of Delegates? No? Watch it, sister. Okay, thank you very much. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 102. We will now retreat to the real property man cave of Delegate Holmes. Yeah, bring your panel up. We're really very fortunate to have Delegate Holmes, who will, root around in the arcana of the law and solve some, compelling problems. So, okay, so we have House Bill 92. Delegate Holmes, you got 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With me is Michael Higgs and Jonathan Glazier. My name is Marvin Holmes, and as indicated, I am the chair of Housing and Real Property. And ladies and gentlemen, the next 3 bills are relevant to ground rents. And there will be a test at the end of the day. And for any of you who fail the test, you will be sent to legislative purgatory. And for you new folks who don't understand what legislative purgatory is, that's called the Judiciary Committee. Let me start, ladies and gentlemen, by explaining ground rents. In the summer of 1632, King Charles I, who owned the land, indicated that if you wanted to build your castle in Maryland, you owned your castle. However, King Charles I said, you must send me rent on your land. And today, that system is still in place. The HB 92, ladies and gentlemen, is a very simple bill. What this bill does is it creates a system within SDET where if something is filed and it is filed incorrectly, there's an opportunity for SDET to take care of that misfiled document. And the crux of the legislation is basically one line on page 2 of the bill, and the rest of the bill indicates on how this process takes place. And on page 2, it basically says, ground lease or an amendment is not registered until the ground lease or the amendment is posted on the online registry. It's really simple, and the rest of the bill just lays out the process. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'm going to turn it over to Michael Higgs, and then he will turn it over to Jonathan, if that's...
Great. Michael, you and John have 2 minutes each. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chairman Barve and Vice Chair Stein. I am Michael Higgs. I'm a resident of District 17, but today I'm here to talk about Delegate Holmes' great bill in my official capacity as the Director of Assessments and Taxation.
Brilliant.
House Bill 92 creates a mechanism for the department to strike documents from the ground rent registry. Currently, the department does not have the statutory authority to strike documents from the registry, even in situations where all the parties agree that there's an error on a document. Furthermore, there are many unregistered and therefore unenforceable ground rents. House Bill 92 clearly states that if a ground rent is unenforceable, no attempt can be made to collect any payment, late fee, interest, collection costs, or other expenses related to that ground lease. Finally, House Bill 92 clarifies that a pending application to register a previously unregistered ground rent is not enforceable until the registration is posted on the department's website. These changes will add important consumer protections for homeowners who have residential ground rents. For these reasons, SDAT urges a favorable vote on House Bill 92. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. John Kern?
Jonathan Glazer.
Jonathan's here in case anyone has any technical questions.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I see. Okay. Let's see. Claudia? Is Claudia here?
Claudia's not. I'm John Kern. Is that a confusion? Okay.
You did sign up to testify in favor, so
I did.
you have 2 minutes.
Great. Oh my gosh.
Stuff out of your way.
Clock is running. Oops. Hello, Vice Chair and committee members. My name is John Kern. I'm the program director with a group called the SOS Fund, and we're a mutual aid effort that happened out of the pandemic. A lot of folks were just feeling like homeowners are a lot more vulnerable around the city. So we actually raised a whole bunch of money with focusing on issues that were displacing people in our communities. And I think that reflects on how unfavorably residents felt about ground rent. We talked a lot about it, and people thought, oh my God, that sounds barbaric and insane. So they donated money to us. And now we step in as a kind of last resort for people that are facing big ground rent. So just as why I think 92 is so great is that as a way of demonstrating how bad why unregistered ground rents should not be able to collect rent, I'll just say even with the registered ground rents, it's still quite a mess for the homeowners when they go to try to make payments. So just as an anecdote, we had a client that we were working with who always called the same number. There was a secretary working for an agency that was collecting ground rent on behalf of one of the ground rent holders, and she left. So the woman calls the number, nobody picks up. She then gets on the bus to go to the address for the ground lease holder. Nobody's there. The office is not going to accept her payment. She had a $1,000 bill at that point, by the way. She had long COVID. So she was really, really trying to come out of this and get this paid up. And so the registered address was incorrect. The address had changed, so she couldn't make it there. She finally looked at the notice from the ground rent holder, and it didn't match up with what the registered address was. So suffice it to say, after going back and forth and this and that, I worked with our legal aid colleagues to try to reduce the amount of payments. We finally were able to make a payment with her and find the correct place to pay for her ground rent. And I say that to say that's a registered ground rent holder. Imagine what it is with unregistered ground rent holders. So I have a favorable view of 0092. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good timing. Is Louise Carwell here? Louise.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is Louise Carwell. I'm the Senior Attorney for Consumer Law at Maryland Legal Aid, and I'm here at the request of Delegate Holmes. I work out of the Baltimore City office and have for many, many years, where most of the ground rents in the state are held. And we frequently have homeowners, I would have to say almost 60 to 70% of the time, that have ground rents attached to their property. It is an extremely difficult process for them in good times, but we have had certainly cases where the ground rents were not registered, where individuals came to us, and we had to sort that out and put a stop to the collection and a stop to any lawsuits that were filed against them. What is very helpful about HB 92 is that it sets a process in place and gives SDAT the enforcement ability, which it should, because that is where ground rents are stored. It would have an agency that understands this process, and we hope that the committee will give HB 92 a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the sponsor or any of the witnesses? Okay, seeing none, that ends the bill hearing for House Bill 92. Delegate, if you want to proceed to HB 93.
We can't do that. And may I have the two gentlemen come back up and be part of this? Again, ladies and gentlemen, this is the continuing saga of ground rents. In this particular scenario, I want to explain two different types of ground rent. There's one that's called redeemable, and there is another called irredeemable. We won't go into the different aspects of that just yet, and that will not be on the test that you will be getting later this evening, which will ban you to the Judiciary Committee if you fail that test. On the issue of redeemable ground rents, if a person who lives in, let's say, for example, a row house in Baltimore City, and they want to redeem their ground rent, then there's a simple process that they should go through to redeem their ground rent. Except that we began to notice that those wishing to redeem their ground rents the applications had been rejected on a lot of cases. And I couldn't understand why the rejections were taking place. And then Jonathan gave me a phone call and explained to me it's because of the process that we had put in place. The process was put in place in 2007 by a ground rent committee, of which I'll have to admit I was on that committee in 2007, and we made a mistake. The only one in my entire life was in 2007. And therefore, we are coming before the General Assembly again, Mr. Chair, to rectify that mistake that we made on the ground rent, the ground rent committee made back in 2007. And it's just a technical aspect. And from there, I'm going to Jonathan and Michael to explain the technical aspect of it and how we can rectify that mistake that we made back in 2007. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Holmes. Chairman Barve, Vice Chair Stein. For the record, my name is Michael Higgs, Director of the Department of Assessments and Taxation. House Bill 93 permits an applicant to submit their final payment and their final affidavit at any time during the ground rent redemption process. Currently, if a leasehold tenant provides final payment or an affidavit to the department too early, the department is required to reject that application. Sending in a payment too quickly is one of those common reasons why an application for ground rent redemption is rejected. Note, this is a technical bill and does not change any part of the ground rent redemption process or program. For these reasons, SDAT urges a favorable vote on House Bill 93. He's just here for technical questions if anyone has any.
Thank you.
Chairman Barve and members of the committee, my name is Louise Carwell. I'm the senior attorney for consumer law with Maryland Legal Aid. Maryland Legal Aid is here at the invitation, Delegate Holmes. This bill would simply make more efficient the process of redeeming ground rent, and for that reason we ask that the committee give HB 93 a favorable report. I will say that our office always, when we find that someone has a ground rent, really encourages them to redeem it if possible and to seek any ability or resources to be able to pay it off, and this would just simply help that. So we urge a favorable report for the bill.
Good afternoon again. My name is Claudia Wilson-Randall, Executive Director of the Community Development Network of Maryland, and I'm here today in favor of House Bill 93. This and the previous bill, I mean, ground rent is an archaic, modern form of sharecropping, and often has a disparate impact in Baltimore City. We see older African-American women in particular be caught up in a ground rent situation, which is really difficult, one, to understand, and even if you do have an understanding of the system, it's often hard to, redeem a property, understand who to call, who owns it, systemic systems with SDAT modernization, where do you find who the rent holder is? We see folks really entangled in these various systems, and I am excited by these bills proposals brought forward by Delegate Holmes today, because we need to dismantle these systems permanently. I also want to mention that the Department of Housing and Community Development has a special loan available for income-eligible homeowners to redeem ground rent, which very few people know about. So there's all of these systems, and this, and I will say this particular technical bill work to begin to help people through a process and to more easily redeem their property. So I urge your favorable report for House Bill 93. Thank you.
I've long felt that a program of public education that was spearheaded by Delegate Holmes in a King Charles I costume and wig was really the way to go.
I think that's an excellent idea, Mr. Chair.
Sounds like a skit for the committee party. Delegate Boyce has a very quick question.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure I understand something. Does HB 92 help with HB 93 or vice versa? Or are they just two? Here's the technician.
Good afternoon, Jonathan Glazer, Legislative Director for the Department of Assessments and Taxation. All three bills that you have today are three independent bills, and they were set up like this because we didn't want to confuse the different issues. This bill that you're hearing right now is simply a technical bill that doesn't change the program. The previous bill and the next bill are policy bills that do change the program.
Okay, so HB 93.
So HB 93 simply says that there's a process right now where pretty much anybody with a residential ground rent can redeem their property through SDAT, even if they are technically irredeemable. You send a notice to your landlord, say, hey, I don't want to deal with you anymore. I'm dealing with SDAT now. And then you can deal with us and send us the final payment. All this bill does is that if you submit your payment too early, there's a statutory rating period where the department posts information on our website, say, hey, landlords, these are the ones that we've collected payment for. Feel free to redeem them with us, and we'll cut you a check. All this bill just says is if a tenant is sending us a check too early, we don't have to reject their application. Right now, because we can't hold on to checks, we have to immediately deposit a check when the department gets it, and then we have to issue a refund, which can take a while through the treasurer's office. During that time period, the person would then have to come up with even more money to pay SDAT, and it's kind of a cash flow issue for a lot of these ground lease tenants, especially if a grant provided that final redemption amount. So again, all this bill really does is say, look, at any time during the process, the department can cash your check and take your final redemption.
Wonderful, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I was out of the room, maybe somebody asked the question, is there a Senate cross file for these bills?
Yes. All three of them have Senate cross files. Senator Hayes and Charles Sidnor are cross files on the Senate side.
And what Senate committee are they going to?
JPR.
Dun, 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 dun.
But they are on the committee, aren't they on the committee?
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully they'll.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 93. Moving right along to 118, Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 118, and it was a fantastic question by Delegate Boyce, because there are three separate bills. This one is also a technical bill, and this is relevant to redeemable ground rents as well. And as Jonathan indicated previously, SDAT currently is a place where people can look for information relevant to ground rents. What this bill does, it allows SDAT to help persons to redeem their ground rent. And once a person redeems their ground rent, then they become what is, like some of our homeowners across the state, a fee simple owner. And so SDAT will now, with 118, be able to help persons redeem their ground rents and become a fee simple owner. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will turn it over.
Fabulous description of that bill. Thank you very much, Delegate. Chairman Barvet and Vice Chair Stein, I am Michael Higgs, the Director of the Department of Assessments and Taxation. House Bill 118 codifies the intent of the General Assembly that it is in the public interest for ground rents to be redeemed. This bill would shift SDAT's ground rent department's mission from being a neutral record keeper to actively assisting homeowners with redeeming their ground rents. Ground rent bills are private transactions between the ground lease holder and the ground lease tenant. House Bill 118 makes several changes to the ground rent billing system. First, the bill ensures that ground rent bills are mailed to the same address where property's tax bills are mailed. Second, the bill requires that ground lease holders use the sample notices that are on the department's webpage. Further, there are many unregistered and therefore unenforceable ground rents. When a ground rent becomes registered or has been delinquent, only 3 years of outstanding ground rent can be collected. This bill ensures that only 3 years of ground rent can be held in escrow. These important changes will add consumer protections for homeowners who have residential ground rents. For these reasons, SDAT urges a favorable vote on House Bill 118.
Okay, thank you very much. Harwell,
Good afternoon, Chairman Barvey and members of the committee. Finally, I'm Louise Carwell, the Senior Attorney for Consumer Law with Maryland Legal Aid, and here at the invitation of Delegate Holmes. SB 118, we urge a favorable report. There are particular protections in this that would further support our role as we advise our clients to try to redeem their ground rent and thus end any possible problems that they could face in the future with owing hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars in order to save their home if they do not realize that they are facing a lawsuit in the circuit court to foreclose their right to redeem. Just to be clear, if a lawsuit is filed and they do not respond or they are not able to pay the amount, they can ultimately be ejected from their home and lose that home. So it is for that reason we are constantly assisting them in both representing them and also finding resources to make sure that they do redeem their ground rent, and this bill sets out that public policy and also additional protections. So we urge a favorable report on this bill. Thank you.
thank you very much. Does anybody else want to testify? And no, come on up. Come on up.
Thank you so much. John Kern again, Program Director at the SOS Fund. Just quick to add, I think and thanks so much, Delegate Holmes, for these. The position of SDAT being more proactive and being able to help folks, I think is a really, really good. I mean, they're a trusted agency, and I think when folks go and reach out to them to get help, having that extra posture is going to be really advantageous. Even like the last bill, just accept the payments when people try to make them. I think that it may not seem like a lot of money, but the redemption amount is a big investment for people because they're looking at it over time, right? So do I continue to pay $104 a year, or should I pay $2,000 right now to redeem? And so it's a lot of the calculus from an intergenerational wealth building standpoint is that. And I did see a number that said that if homes have an extinguished ground rent, that their appraisal value goes up on average about $3,000. So again, not a lot of money. And so for when people go and talk to their heirs and talk to their family about getting this big, one-time payment together, having all the help and the ability for SDAT to process that and support them through that process. So we're very favorable for all three of these bills. Thanks, Delegate Holmes.
First question goes to Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for the bill sponsor. Delegate, if we flunk your ground rent exam, will there be a makeup?
Absolutely. At the will of the chair, I will provide any type of makeup and wigs, et cetera, that the committee would like for me to.
Thank you.
Thank you. I still don't understand this committee, but thank you. This is a new member question, so please forgive me. I do know ground rents were established in 1631 by King George, but Charles, dadgummit.
Ban her to judiciary.
Please don't send me to judiciary. All right, bad start. But my confusion is, this is taking up a lot of resources to follow these up, and I'm sure with all the bills you're putting forward this year, why are we still renewing these leases? And have we put a stop to that? Can we not come up with some sort of settlement for the ground leaseholders to just sort of stop this practice altogether?
To answer your question, we are, over the years, we have inched ourselves closer and closer and closer to getting away from this entire process altogether. As I indicated at the very top, it's a very antiquated process. And at some point, I'll share with you some of the stories that go back to 1600s, Lord Baltimore, Lord Calvert, et cetera. So we are moving in that direction to try to get away from it. And this is just another step.
So in short, it's a private property right, so the government cannot come along and just simply extinguish it. So it has to be, the courts have ruled that there has to be a private transaction to, in order to redeem the ground rents. And we're just trying to make it as easy as possible to facilitate those redemptions and help people to get out from under the generational effect of these ground rents that have been around since the 1600s.
Redeeming a ground rent is often beneficial to all parties. Ground leaseholders, they would rather a fat check than just their sometime $49 payment every 6 months that they struggled to get from these people. So it really, it's to everyone's benefit when a ground rent is redeemed. The department is committed to protecting the property right to ground rent. But what we want to do is, again, just make this whole process easier for everybody involved.
Yeah, it's basically, it's a civil right embedded in a piece of property. It's you know, we were able to fight a civil war to get rid of slavery, but we didn't think to throw ground rents in there.
Serfdom survives in that.
If you have constituents with ground rents, the department is here to help them redeem their ground rents, and we really want them to reach out to us. We partner with the mayor of Baltimore, who often does PSAs about it.
Thank you so much, and thank you.
And just to expand upon something that Jonathan said, sometimes the ground rents are something like $24 like in January, and then another $24 in June, or $49 in January, another $49 in June, or $90, that kind of thing.
Transaction costs, very inefficient, the whole thing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee. Oh,
House Bill, Mayor, I'm sorry, Delegate Lehman.
Delegate Healy also had a question.
Okay, go ahead. Throw your 2 cents in there.
One thing that we found out when we did all this study about this is this whole constitutional issue is complicated by the fact that these ground rents have been bundled and sold, and people use them for income.
Mm-hmm.
So people might own dozens of them, and they get income from them, but it's like when the mortgages were bundled, and you can't extract and find out, tracking it back to the individuals. So that's another challenge. The laws we have in place help people extinguish them if they owe them. So we just need to make sure that they take advantage of that if they can.
Yeah. Okay, that ends the public hearing on House Bill. What? Oh, go ahead, Mary.
I hope this is a brief question, and I'm not being facetious, Delegate Holmes, but you are such an amazing expert at ground rent. It's truly astonishing. I was just curious if you've ever considered doing an omnibus ground rent bill to address all these many issues.
Well, we kind of thought we got to that point back in 2007 and some other timeframes, but every time we move in that direction, something else pops up.
Another worm crawls out of the ground.
Yes, okay. Yes. And trust me, Delegate, I would love not to have to come back every year and talk to you all about King Charles I and the castle, okay?
It's a major source of entertainment.
It is. Okay, thank you.
All righty. So that ends the public hearing for today. Any announcements? I don't, any announcements from anybody at all? In that case, we are adjourned until tomorrow. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.